Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cultivate E.D.H podcast. As always, I'm Aaron,
And I'm Cam.
and we're here to talk to you about our top 25 for Theros Beyond Death. Now, honestly, I did pre-release this past weekend, and that set was so much fun to do sealed with. So, our first one on the list here is Healy Odd Son Crown.
Now,
Cameron, you want to read that for us?
now, keep in mind that these are in no particular order. These are just our top 25 all together of the set. So we just did, for clarity's sake, we did it in Wooburg order. So, like Aaron said, we're going to start with Heliod. Heliod the Sun Crown is a legendary enchantment creature subtype god. For 2 and a white, you get a 5/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to white is less than 5, Heliod isn't a creature. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control or enchantment you control. 1 and a white, another target creature gains lifelink until the end of turn. Heliod's like pretty good. I mean, for 5, he's a 5/5 for 3. If you can turn him on, he's a 5/5 indestructible for 3, which is pretty good. He has a combo with Walking Ballista, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? Am I right on that, Aaron?
Yeah, you're correct on that. And the way that works, basically, you pay for Walking Ballista. You just have to put 2 mana into him, so he comes in with a 1/1 counter on him. Then you give him lifelink until end of turn, and you'll remove the 1/1 counter, and hit someone with it as Walking Ballista does, and then Heliod will trigger, and he'll get the +1/+1 counter, so he doesn't die, and you can just repeat that. So he just sits there and pings people to death. Now, I don't think that maybe you have to put him in for 2, so because I don't know if there's a time between the Heliod trigger and him losing that counter that he would die.
I don't think there is, because of the way the stack works, but even so, it still goes infinite, which would mean because Walking Ballista is an XX, you'd have to cast Walking Ballista for 4 to get the power toughness to 2. So even if you still had to do, I mean, it's still pretty good, that you have to pay 4 mana and then 1 and a white to give the Ballista lifelink, and then you can just go infinite because the whole interaction between the +1/+1 counter and then removing it, it's kind of like the whole persist thing, where if you give a persist creature a +1/+1 counter, it counteracts the -1/-1 counter that the mechanic itself puts on the creature when it comes back from the graveyard. Heliod, even if you're not gonna play him with the Walking Ballista combo, I think he still finds a home in like some life gain decks, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of them run kind of simpler stuff like Ajani's Primate, things like that, and that's basically like this is basically stuff like that except better. And you can give stuff lifelink. If you have kind of a big fatty that doesn't have lifelink, but you try to find ways to give it to him, this is a really good 2 mana repeatable way to give things lifelink.
And even then, it's basically an Ajani's Pride Mate, like you said. But Ajani's Pride Mate, instead of like targeting itself whenever you gain life, the Pride Mate gets +1/+1 counter. Whenever you gain life, you can make Heliod point where the +1/+1 counters go. So I feel like if you have even a little bit of life gain synergy, in like say your +1/+1 counters deck, or something else like a dedicated life gain deck, or a +1/+1 counter deck, you can still put Heliod in because of the activated ability for 1 and a white. You're still going to get that lifelink trigger, and you're going to get to put the +1/+1 counters where you want to put them. He's just pretty good. I feel like he's a solid card. 3 mana, 5/5. If you can turn him on, but other than that, 3 mana indestructible enchantment, still pretty good.
Yeah, so moving on from that, we got Elsebeth Conquers Death. I really like this card. It is a saga, enchantment saga for 3, a white and a white. Its first, I believe they're called chapters. Exile target permanent. An opponent controls with converted mana cost 3 or greater. The second one, non-creature spells your opponents cast cost 2 more to cast until your next turn. And then the third one, return target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter or a loyalty counter on it. I think this is really good. I honestly think this might find a home in my Super Friends deck.
I mean, it's pretty like just let's just evaluate it on like let's evaluate it like a planeswalker almost. So for 5 mana, you get to exile target permanent and opponent controls with a converted mana cost 3 or greater. That's pretty like for 5 mana. It's a little pricey. Um, but you do get to hit the permanent. It's exile target permanent, not creature, not artifact, whatever that you might be able to get for like a reduced mana cost elsewhere. It hits a permanent. So that's the biggest thing in the chapter 1 when you put that first lore counter on. So say I have Elsebeth Conquers Death in my hand, and I'm staring down a Blightsteel Colossus. Well, I'm going to play Elsebeth Conquers Death, and exile target permanent and opponent controls with converted mana cost 3 or greater. So I'm going to target the Blightsteel.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like that's the way to play this. You got a big fatty coming your way who's about to, hit you with a bunch of infect or something of that nature. You're gonna be able to exile it, and a lot of enchantment. If you're running this in an enchantment deck, a lot of them have things that'll give your enchantments flash or things like that. So you can do it at instant speed. Things like that, is always really helpful.
And then in the second chapter, non-creature spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast until your next turn. It's kind of like Ghostly Prison in a way.
I
No,
mean,
non-creature spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast until your next turn. So it's like, it,
it's
it's
more
it's
taxes
more
than
taxy. Well, I mean, like Ghostly Prison is a tax, but it's like a tax on attacking. Um,
yeah.
Elspeth Conquers Death, the second chapter, really it just kind of like it it puts that tax on there, kind of like Ghostly Prison does, for a turn. But Ghostly Prison is only for attacking, whereas it doesn't just like tax your opponent's spells.
Yeah, and if you're running against someone who's really spell heavy, some combo-y decks, this is really gonna slow them down. Especially, if you land this on curve or before curve, it might even stop them for a turn or two, or for one turn, obviously. But it definitely does not feel pretty good to get hit by the Elspeth Conqueror's Death second chapter.
Yeah, and like the third chapter, return target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter or loyalty counter on it. I mean, like, think about it like you're playing this in, say, a white black deck that has a little bit of reanimation going on. You might have reanimate, you might have animate dead, some of the reanimation spells. This is not only redundancy for that deck that you're gonna get to eventually, hopefully, assuming nobody destroys your enchantment. Hopefully, you're gonna get to return that creature or planeswalker. But that's the key there is that it's creature or planeswalker. So like this card can go in any deck that like cares about planeswalkers. So for instance, Aaron, you're like you mentioned, your Super Friends deck. So if I kill your I don't know, like what's a good planeswalker that I might want to kill in your deck?
Oh, I don't know, like a Johnny
Yeah,
before I
like
get
as
100
Johnny Mentor
life.
of Heroes before you gain 100 life. Say I Hero's Downfall destroy target creature or planeswalker. A Hero's Downfall um your or your Johnny Mentor of Heroes. And then this comes down, and that like I know your planeswalker deck can manipulate counters. So say I'm going to play Elspeth Conquers Death. I'm going to get the exile target permanent trigger, and then I'm going to proliferate once, or I'm going to proliferate enough times to get the third lore counter on there, and then get that Ajani back. That's pretty good.
Yeah, especially like when if you're in the late game or anything like that, and you have a lot of mana to spare, things like that, it's going to be easy for you to proliferate. And then not only that, maybe I have something that if when a planeswalker enters the battlefield, like I think it's one of the oaths. When planeswalkers enter the battlefield, they enter with an additional loyalty counter. So there's an additional two, gets me even closer. There's just a lot of good synergy with Elspeth Conqueror's Death. So I definitely think it finds a home in your Super Friends deck.
I think it finds a home in a lot of white base decks, +1/+1 counter decks. Um, white black decks or whatever recursion deck you might have. It's really good redundancy for like removal and then attacks, and then obviously getting something back if we're talking about this is in the late game. So
Yeah. So
yeah, let's move on to the next one. Idyllic Tutor. Aaron, do you have Idyllic Tutor pulled up?
uh, yeah, it is right here. Idyllic Tutor for 2 in a white. Search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. It is a sorcery.
Tutors are
I
good.
mean, yeah, tutors are always just good value. I mean, there's a lot of good things you can. go look for this. You know, it's turn 3, and um, maybe you need to deal with a threat. You go look for Elsebeth conquers death. You know, you go find um, maybe if it's in my Super Friends deck, I go find one of the oaths, so Oath of Ajani, something like that. Gotta. There's a lot of just good synergies with any tutor ever. I mean,
Well,
obviously it's a little, less widespread. Like it's not, I can't search for any card
well,
like
that's the
some of your
thing.
other
That's the
tutors.
limitation of the tutor is that it only finds enchantments.
Yeah, exactly. So it finds itself in a little bit less of decks because it's not your demonic tutor or anything like that. It is limited to the enchantment, but I still think this is gonna find a lot of really good homes in Commander because tutors are just good value, especially 3 mana. That's great.
Yeah, like most commander decks are running a non-zero amount of enchantments. So I guess like you obviously don't want to put idyllic tutor in those kind of decks because if I'm only running like 3 enchantments and they're all like the type of enchantment like fertile ground where I enchant a land and then that land taps for more mana. I might not want to put idyllic tutor in that deck simply because if those are the only enchantments that I'm running, I don't really know how badly I want to find that enchantment other than ramping, but then you're down 2 cards as a result of that. You might put Idyllic Tutor in a deck where if, say, let's go back to like Healy Odd. Healy Odd's an enchantment. I can find Healy Odd with my Idyllic Tutor. So if I'm playing the Healy Odd Walking Ballista combo, that might be a reason for me to play Idyllic Tutor, is so that I can find my pieces.
Yeah, and if you're in any token deck or +1/+1 counter deck, you go look for your doubling season. It's just it tutors just help you find your combo pieces and your
Or your
game winning
powerhouses
effects.
like Doubling
Yeah,
Season. And I think on that we can move on to our next one here. Eidolon of Obstruction. So for 1 and a white, you get a 2/1 enchantment creature spirit with first strike and loyalty abilities of planeswalkers your opponent's control cost 1 more to activate. This house is your Super Friends deck.
absolutely. I
I
was
mean,
kind of upset when they printed it. I'm not gonna
putting
lie.
any tax on a planeswalker ability is really going to hurt them because a loyalty ability of a planeswalker is something that you do for free. It doesn't cost you mana other than the mana you sink into the planeswalker itself. So to tax the ability to +1, d- yeah. So like if I try to like -1 on this, I still have to pay 1, right? Like
Yep.
so like if I try to like -1 my planeswalker or whatever it is, I have to pay 1. Like and that really hurts too.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what you're gonna do, like even if you have a planeswalker that you're like, oh, I can get rid of this with one of my planeswalker's abilities, well, you're still gonna have to sink at least 1 mana into it. And like I've played against some taxes decks, and taxing can really just get you out of your rhythm. You got a plan going forward. You're like, all right, turn 1, I'm gonna Soul Ring. Turn 2, this, whatever, and then you get taxed, and you're like, this really sucks because it just slows you down.
Well,
And
especially in your planeswalker deck where you're counting on the fact that you're going to get that loyalty ability as something you don't have to spend mana on. You're going to get whatever that effect is, and then you're going to use your mana for the turn to do whatever it is you need to do.
yeah, especially like a lot of them, it's like drawing cards and things like that. And I mean, yeah, it's gonna be fine if I want to, pay 1 and draw a card with like a Jace or something like that. But I don't want to be wasting my mana on loyalty abilities when it's something that normally I wouldn't have to do. But
Exactly.
like overall, like if you are going to host planeswalker decks, if you guys have a super friends deck that's running amok in your play group, this is definitely something that you're gonna want to include because it's definitely gonna hurt those super friends players for sure.
Other than that, I don't really think you're playing it. Unless you have a reason to. It's really targeted against planeswalkers.
Yeah, I mean it. Like I agree. I don't see any other reason for running it unless you're running up against super friends.
But hey, I mean, if that's your problem, this is the card for you then. So with that, I think we can move on to the first of the intervention cycle, Healy Odd's intervention. So for X white white, we have an instant, choose one, destroy X target artifacts or enchantments, or target player gains twice X life.
Okay, this card's a lot better than it look like. It looks pretty good. I played against it during their pre-release, and obviously a lot of Theros stuff is enchantments and things like that. They paid 5 mana and destroyed 3 of my permanents. It hurt. This card hurts.
Well, especially in like limited, like if you evaluate this from a perspective of like Theros Beyond Death limited, it's going to hurt a lot more because there's a lot more enchantment creatures, there's a lot more enchantments. Period. However, in the realm of Commander, I think we have to like look at it more as of I'm gonna get to destroy. I'm gonna get to cast disenchant X number of times.
Yeah, and honestly, like it's still pretty good because now you're in a four-player format, and a lot of times people have just value enchantments, whether it's getting them to draw cards or things like that. A lot of people play decent value enchantments, so if you can go around the entire table and say, boom, I'm going to destroy at least one of everyone's enchantments. You paid 3 into it. That's going to hurt, and it's not a board wipe for enchantment, so it's not going to hurt you at all either. So overall, pretty good. Not backbreaking or anything like that, but definitely good value for the mana cost, I think.
I think we really need to look at this as like a late game mana sink. This in the late game is either going to clean up the problems on the board, so the artifacts or enchantments that are causing issues, or I mean like if you're down to like 15 life and you're in the late game and you have enough mana to like cast this, you're gonna gain twice X life. So if I just sink 8 mana into this, eight white white, so I guess 10 altogether, I'm going to gain 16 life, and then I'm going to go up to 31 if I was say I was at 15. So I'm almost back to my starting life total or what I was at, you know, 4 or 5 turns ago. And I think that's where these interventions really shine is that some of them are late game mana sinks, and this just happens to be a really good example of a late game mana sink.
Yeah, and honestly, like I don't have much to say on Heliod's intervention. It's decent value. If if you have a spot for it where you kind of need a mana sink that'll help save you in the late game, this is definitely going to be one of them. But I think with that we can move on to number 6 on here. Kiora bests the Sea God. It is another saga for 5, a blue and a blue. Chapter 1, create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token with hexproof. Chapter 2, tap all non-land permanents target opponent controls. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. And the third chapter, gain control of target permanent and opponent controls, untap it.
I think this card's great. I mean, it's a little mana intensive, but at the same time, it's not like you're not getting your values worth. Especially like if you can ramp into this early. Imagine like getting this out on like turn 4 because of like artifact fast mana, or I just like played rampant growth and cultivate, and I've made my land drops. Um, I get an 8/8 token, and then the next time around, I'm gonna hit somebody with it because I'm gonna tap all non-land permanents. Oh well, yeah, I'm gonna get to use it, but I don't really have like I have my choice of who I'm gonna hit because I'm gonna get to tap all their non-land permanents, and then those non-land permanents obviously won't untap the next time. So then I can hit whoever it is again with my 8/8 Kraken, and then I basically just get or I get a mind control or whatever it is, except it's target permanent. I get a permanent of theirs, and I get it, and I untap it.
Yeah, this card's really good, especially, you're sitting at the table and you got one player who's kind of popping off doing, playing a lot of creatures and things like that, especially if they have some like early fast mana and in terms of like soul ring signets, things like that. You play this, you hit the second chapter. Not only do you tap down their creatures, but it's non-land permanents. So you tap down their soul rings and their signets for a turn, and that's really going to slow them down on their next turn. Which is, if someone's taking off really quickly, that's going to be really good value for you. And as a plus, you'll probably get to swing in for a little bit of damage, along with, if the other players at the table are with you on the fact that that player is a problem.
Yeah, and like I want to really really like this card, but there's just something about it that I feel like maybe it doesn't get there, and I only say that because it is 5 blue blue. So it's really mana intensive. I can't cast it at instant speed, and I'm not getting that tap all non-land permanents target opponent controls immediately. I have to wait a turn, which means that somebody could see the threat that like Kiora Best the Sea God poses to them, and then use their removal on it. And I feel like if I pay 7 mana to make an 8/8, it feels kind of bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I do think that if you're, playing this in Commander, it's gonna take a little bit of politicking to kind of keep it out there. If you've got that one player that has enchantment removal in their hand, and you say, "Hey, I won't tap down all your stuff if you keep Kiora Best of Sea God here." You can try and take care of another player. If you have to do some politicking, it might be a little bit different, but for the most part, I do agree it is a little mana intensive. But I still think that for the sake of Commander and politics and things like that, it's definitely playable.
And I agree. I mean, it's like you said, part of it's like politicking, and then the other part of it is like strategy, like when to play it. So, I might see that there's a person across the table that's becoming a problematic threat on the table, and then I might play this because this might not be nearly as bad as whatever's going on over there. So I might be able to say, well, hey, I mean, like I get an 8/8 now, and then, next turn I can take my 8/8 and then whatever else I have, and I can hit him while his shields are down.
Yeah, and that's just part of the fun of Commander is being able to politic and do things like that. And this is one of those cards that just helps you do that.
I think with
And I
that
think,
we can move on to
yeah,
our next card. Thassa Deep Dwelling. So for 3 and a blue, you get a 6/5 indestructible legendary enchantment creature god. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to one other target creature you control and then return it to the battlefield under your control. 3 and a blue, tap another target creature. This is Conjurer's Closet. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say strictly better than Conjurer's Closet.
I agree and I disagree at the same time. I definitely think if you're in blue, it's better, but obviously you can't play this in any deck that you don't have blue. So like, there's a lot of decks that aren't in blue that are gonna play Conjurer's Closet, but I do agree that in blue you're gonna want to play this over that. But I also think you could run them at the same time, have if you have if it's one of those decks where you really just want to flicker and hit ETBs with maybe like a Panharmonicon and things like that, you're able to blink a bunch of stuff in one turn. I think you run them both, honestly.
Well, the only reason I say strictly better is because most blink decks do include blue. You have like your Bant blink decks, your Esper blink decks. I guess I guess you could do Sultai blink too. I think it really has to kind of like it has to be white blue color adjacent, and I only say that because most of the cards that care about blinking stuff are centered in white and blue. So I feel like if you have a blink deck, it's most likely already in blue, and then Thassa Deep Dwelling is 4 mana, so it's 1 mana cheaper than Conjurer's Closet. Thassa's indestructible, whereas Conjurer's Closet is not. And then Conjurer's Closet also doesn't have the additional text of 3 and a blue, tap another target creature. So it can't say, again, let's use the Blightsteel example. There's a Blightsteel like coming at me. It's like, okay, I'm going to declare it as an attacker, or whenever I need to pay 4 mana, 3 and a blue to tap the Blightsteel down before it goes to combat so that it doesn't like actually before it gets in there, and then also Thassa, if your devotion to blue is 5, you get an indestructible 6/5 in addition to the blink ability and the tap another target creature. So I think all in general, like yeah, if you're really really in need of that like second ability or like that second copy of Conjurer's Closet, that I mean, well, I should wind that back. Thassa should be replacing Conjurer's Closet. So if you're really in need of that second effect, then yeah, go ahead and play Conjurer's Closet. Obviously, it's an artifact and it can go in every deck. But I feel like the decks that are centered in blue and blinking stuff, I feel like they probably want Thassa a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And It's one of those cards where you see that it's just, a card that a lot of people play on a stick and has some more text, which makes it that much better. And it's one of those cards that I know Wizards saw this and they were like, you know what? We know that people are playing Conjurer's Closet. Let's give them another one, but better. And but just put it in a color so it's a little more restrictive. And that's something that we really like to see.
Yeah, so like overall, Thassa's really good. I think that in the Blink decks that you really should be playing her in or as the commander of, really want that. Maybe not necessarily the end step Blink, but still, it's just necessarily the redundancy of, well, I'm going to get said enter the battlefield effect again at my end step, whatever it is. Maybe it's when so and so enters the battlefield, bounce target permanent to its owner's hand. Well, cool. I'm going to get rid of that problematic Blightsteel before I even have to waste the 4 mana to tap it down before it goes to combat.
And I think with that we can move to, I believe, our last blue card, Thassa's Intervention. So our next intervention here, X, a blue and a blue. Choose one, look at the top X cards of your library, put up to 2 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And the other one being counter target spell unless its controller pays twice X.
Overall, pretty good, I feel like.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like, you know, being able to dig for stuff in there's a lot of blue decks that are kind of combo-y and they need to be able to dig for those combos and things like that. So that first ability there is a really good way to dig, and then counter target spell unless its controller pays twice X. So, you pay 3, they have to pay 2. If someone tries to drop all their mana into, if we want to use the Blightsteel example again, you just pay 3 mana and they don't get to do it.
Yeah, and that's like a counter spell is counter target spell, so it doesn't say non creature, non whatever. So it's just counter target spell unless its controller pays X. I feel like that's pretty good because again, it's a late game. We're gonna see this across the spectrum of the intervention cycle that it's a late game mana sink. So if someone say we're just coming out of a board wipe and someone goes, well, I'm gonna cast this big creature, say it's like a but I guess we'll just keep using the Blightsteel class. I'm going to cast this Blightsteel after the board wipe, and then you're going to say, oh well, that's his intervention. I guess I'll pay 5 mana for it, so 3 blue. Now you have to pay 6 if you want to keep that Blightsteel, which is a pretty big hurdle to overcome. And then again, the whole late game mana sink where maybe things are getting out of control and it's late enough to where I have expendable mana. Well, I might, on the end step before my turn, Thassa's Intervention for the top 10 cards in my library just to see if I can find an answer for whatever is going on the battlefield. And then I'll untap and then hopefully I'll find whatever it is I'm looking for and then get to cast it and resolve the issues on the board.
And the other thing that I do really like about that first ability, it's not just find one card, it's actually find two. So, if things are starting to get out of hand and maybe you're looking to end the game, you need to find one or two more combo pieces, on that end step, you dig as far as you can, and then hopefully you find those pieces you're looking for, and you can pick up both of them, which is great.
Yeah, it's like well, brainstorm. Brainstorm, you draw 3, but then you have to put 2 back. It's kind of like instead of you're just netting 1 card. Depending on how much you sink into this, you get 2. Well, maybe I should brainstorm's a bad example. Maybe I should use like dig through time. Obviously, you're not getting the delve discount, but at the same time, dig through time says look at the top 7, and you get 2 of them. The rest go on your bottom of your library. Thassa's intervention is the same in a lot of ways because you get those 2, and then the main point is that you're getting 2 cards instead of 1, which is always good because you're gonna find more answers. Hopefully, is the idea.
And I think with that we can move into black, starting with Erebos, Bleak Hearted. He's a 3 and a black, indestructible, legendary enchantment creature god. As long as your devotion to black is less than 5, he is not a creature. He's a 5/6. Whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life if you do draw a card. And for 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature. Target creature gets -2/-1 until end of turn.
This card is going to go in a lot of the sacrifice based decks, and that's not just because of the pay 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature, target creature gets -2/-1, but the a lot of the sacrifice decks, you're paying life to draw cards in most instances, or not most, but some instances, and or you're paying life to, like, say it's like a black green Marin deck or something, and you're using like a birthing pod. You're paying, like, and you pay 1 mana, and you pay the 2 life to activate the pod. And then whatever creature dies off the pod, then it's like, well, then I have to pay another 2 life just to draw the card. So I feel like Erebos goes into a lot of the sacrifice aristocraty type decks, but I feel like he also goes into some of the life gain decks too, because of the whole pay 2 life, draw a card whenever a creature I control dies.
Yeah, I think overall he has a lot of, you know, different options that he can do. Whether it be the aristocrat theme, the life gain theme, things like that. There's a lot of different things that you can do to him and still get value out of him because, you know, someone goes to board wipe, well, he's indestructible, so he's not going to get hit by it. You've got a bunch of creatures dying, you can pay, 4 life, draw 2 cards, whatever. You're able to pay life to kind of replenish your hand and kind of reset after that board wipe. I think overall he's just a really good card.
And I mean, in the early game too. I've played it against against decks that have played Liliana, the Last Hope, where one of her abilities gives like the -2/-1, and it's not nothing. Like those early turns where like you play your, I don't know, like your Land War Elves or your early game cards where it's like, well, someone's open and I'm not going to use this whatever creature it is. Say like Elvish Visionary enters the battlefield, draws a card. Well, it's done its thing. Say somebody's open. Well, I'm going to attack you with my Elvish Visionary, and then we're like, oh well, next turn play Erebos. Hopefully already have like a creature on the battlefield that wants to has a death trigger, so that they can pay 2 the following turn to give -2/-1, get the death trigger off their creature, and then pay 2 life, draw a card. It's just there's like several layers of synergy where he himself is a sacrifice outlet that you can pay mana into. You're going to make something smaller, and then as soon as whatever you sacrifice to Erebos dies, hopefully it has a death trigger if you built your deck correctly, and then you're going to get to pay 2 life to then draw a card. So it's like a layered cake. Each layer has its own function.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people, I think he's going to see a pretty good amount of playing Commander, honestly. I think there's a lot of different synergies that he goes with. And honestly, for those of you playing the different black decks with that are when you're gaining even the smallest amount of life, even if you're getting, 2, 4 life a turn, you're still, you don't have to get 100 life in a turn to make good use of his ability. So I think he's gonna find a lot of homes, and I'm excited to see what people do with him. Maybe even make him a commander or something like that. Who knows?
Oh, he'd be really good as like the commander of like a mono black, say, aristocrats deck or something like that. I feel like he fits right in.
Yeah, and I think with that we can move on. It looks like we got Woosh Ryder up next. When he's a creature horror for 2 and a black. When Woosh Strider enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 white goat creature token. Sacrifice another creature, scry 1. He has escape for 3 black black. Exile 4 other cards from your graveyard. He escapes with 2/1/1 counters on him.
He brings his own lunch. He brings his own
Uh,
lunch. He brings his own goat to munch on.
I This is an interesting card. I like the, being able to sack another creature to scry because especially, sometimes in those black decks you've sacrificed a bunch of creatures. You might be running out of stuff. Maybe you're picking up a bunch of lands or something. You're hitting a big like chunk of lands that's in your deck, but now you can sack some creatures to scry, and there isn't a lot of scrying happening in black. if I'm
Well,
not mistaken.
the biggest comparison to make between Woosh Ryder is Viscera, because Viscera does the same thing. You sacrifice another creature, scry one, it doesn't get a token or anything, or it doesn't have escape. But the main, like, focusing on the sacrifice outlet, Viscera says sacrifice another creature, scry one. Um, so like just looking at them face value, you want to say Viscera is better because it's one mana for a 1/1, and it just has the sacrifice outlet. It's not 3 mana, but you're also not getting the 3/2 body. Um, I I want to say Woe Strider is better because yeah, I can play him on turn 3 at the latest because in Commander you can obviously get him out earlier. But Woe Strider, he brings a creature, so immediately you play Woe Strider, enters the battlefield. Okay, sweet, I can scry one now. And then say Woe Strider dies, or you pitch Woe Strider to another one of your sacrifice outlets, say an Ashnod's Altar, you get 2 mana, and that 2 mana, I don't know why you would do this in this order, other than trying to get, like, maybe you have a Dictate of Erebos out where it cares about creatures dying. So you might pitch your Woe Strider to another sacrifice outlet, say it's the Ashnod's Altar again. So you have 2 mana. That pays for 2 mana of the 5 you're going to pay for the escape cost, exile 4 other cards, and then you're going to get it back. And that's the biggest piece, is that Woe Strider is recurable over Viscera Seer.
Okay, I'm kind of curious. How do you feel about the escape mechanic?
I feel like it's not for every deck. There might be some cards with escape that you feel like can go in every deck, but especially on like the graveyard decks, unless you're self-milling yourself or you have a way to get a lot of stuff into the graveyard, the escape mechanic, like the exiling 4 other cards to get the like in the case of Woe Strider, exiling 4 other cards from my graveyard, that's not something I'm going to be able to do all the time unless, say, I'm playing like Woe Strider and a Sultai self mill deck where, oh well, I can pitch 4 lands because I'm not going to get those lands back. Whereas there might be some other creatures in my graveyard that I want to get back because I want to bring them back and then use their death triggers again. So the exiling of the cards on the escape mechanic isn't nothing. It's not like, oh well, I'm not going to use these again, because I feel like Woe Strider wants to be in the decks where that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the for a lot of escape cards, it feels like it's a really high mana cost, and then you have to, totally get rid of a lot of cards. I don't love it, but I definitely do think there are homes for some of these cards.
I don't think I agree with you. I don't think that the escape mechanic is for every deck, but I think the escape mechanic is a pretty good one. I mean, recursion is recursion, and obviously, if you're playing like fetch lands, then well, I'm not going to get those lands back. So if I want to escape my Woe Strider or whatever other card that I'm playing that has escape, I can just throw those fetch lands under the bus because I don't need them anymore. They've served their purpose.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. I think with that we can move to our next one. It's going to be I believe our last black card, Erebos' Intervention. It is X and 1 black, so it's the first one we've seen so far that is only 1 pip instead of 2. Um, it is an instant. Choose one target creature gets -X until end of turn. You gain X life. Or exile up to twice X target cards from graveyards.
This card gets around indestructible, and it's an instant speed, give -X. So we see similar cards like Toxic Deluge, where I get to pay a certain amount of life and then give everything -X, which gets around one of the hardest things to get around in Commander, which is indestructible, where you have one of two options. You have to either exile it, or you have to do this, which is give it -X, until it dies. And then you gain X life, which is If you're playing this in a white-black life gain deck or a mono-black life gain deck, like maybe you're playing Erebos as the commander, and you have a way to gain life in mono black, something like that, and you have a way to abuse it, something along that line. And then also, this card really hates on other graveyard decks. Exile up to twice X target cards from graveyards, which is always good. I mean, you're getting that doubling of say I pay 2 and a black for this, well then I get to exile 4 cards. Especially if you're playing against like the Muldrotha player. The Muldrotha player is gonna hate this because all the stuff that they're like either sacrificing then putting back in your graveyard. Well, I'm gonna play Erebos' intervention, and I'm like, oh, well, I see that Walking Ballista in your graveyard, and I know what the combo is with Mikaeus, and I can see the lines coming together. Well, I'm gonna play Erebos' intervention, exile this, and then like say 3 other things from your graveyard because I know they're problematic.
Yeah, I think this card, especially with the amount of graveyard decks I see in Commander, this card's definitely gonna find some homes. If if people have the problematic Muldrotha player, or you know any other kind of graveyard decks, the problematic Marin every so often that you can see, this is going to be a card that you're going to want to put in if you're playing against those decks, because it's really going to hose them. Especially, you get into the late game, they have their graveyard stacking up, and you pay. I mean, imagine paying 6 mana into this. I don't know that there's really any reason to do that, but you pay 6 mana this, you get to get rid of 12 of their cards. That's gonna hurt a lot in those decks,
Especially if
especially coming in the
like
late
if you're
game.
taking the stuff that they want. So like like they might have like like say it's the Bodrotha player and they have a Caustic Caterpillar, which is just like a little like 1/2 common from Magic Origins, but it has the text 1 in a green sacrifice Caustic Caterpillar, destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's recurable because of Muldrotha's ability. It's recurable like removal. So say like I'm just so sick of my artifacts getting blown up because he can play Caustic Caterpillar every turn. Well, I'm going to Erebos' intervention for 3, so 3 in a black, and then I'm going to exile 6 cards from your graveyard. I'm going to exile that stupid Caterpillar, and I'm going to exile all, what other utility they might have at their disposal in their graveyard.
But yeah, for the most part, definitely finds a lot of homes. I'm looking forward to playing this card because I know there's some troublesome indestructible stuff that I've had to deal with from time to time. So, and if I come across those graveyard decks, gonna be a good card to have in addition to my deck.
Yeah, and I think with that we can move on to the next card on our list, which is Underworld Breach. Un-
Underworld Breach. It's a 1 and a red enchantment. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. And then at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach.
Now, I know we just kind of like were uncertain about escape, but I feel like this card is very good for like combo based decks that can play this and then kind of use it the same way that Past in Flames does, where all your stuff gains flashback equal to its converted mana cost. I feel like this is kind of like Past in Flames adjacent, but it's also cheaper. But you only get it for 1 turn. But the combo decks that are going to be playing this only need it for that 1 turn. Because say like oh, I have a Dark Ritual in my graveyard. Well, I'm going to pay 1, and then I'm going to exile 3 other cards that I don't need, and then I'm going to get this back, and then I'm going to cast this out of my hand, and like I'm going to go down the line of like whatever the combo it is you might be playing. I know that I am going to be trying this out in my Yidris Wheels deck so that I can play Underworld Breach and say, well, I want that Wheel of Fortune out of my graveyard, so I'm going to pay 3 mana and then exile 3 lands because there's always lands in my graveyard from the past wheels that I've played. Exile 3 lands and then cast Wheel of Fortune, do it again. Hopefully I have some of my enablers on the battlefield.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. Let's pretend for a second that, maybe you play this and for some reason you don't win off of whatever you escape with. If let's say you're doing an is it combo deck and you're running Thassa Deep Dwelling for some reason, could you at the beginning of your end step do Thassa's ability first to blink the enchantment to get around the or the sacrifice at the beginning of your end step?
I'm not really sure on that one. My
Because I would.
guess is that you go to the beginning of your end step, and then the trigger for Underworld Breach would go on the stack, and then if you found a way, if you had a way to blink it, then the beginning of the end step. The wording might be a little funky. I'm not entirely sure because then it might go away at the beginning of, like, say you successfully blink it and it comes back. It might go away at the beginning of the next opponent's end step because it just says the end step, not your end step.
Oh, you're right on that one. I think it would just go away on the next player's end step. So unless you have, I don't know, something that's gonna let you untap all your lands and you'll be able to do that during the opponent's next turn. I get like, but that's magical Christmas land. All the stars are aligning, everything's going according to plan, which we Commander players know almost never happens. Uh, but yeah, you're right. It is at the beginning of the end step, so it's just it would just hit the next end step, which is so you're not going to be able to keep this around. Is basically what we're getting at here.
You're probably not going to be able to keep it around for very long. But again, I feel like this is the kind of card that you're only using it to combo off. Um, I guess you could use it for value. Like I don't know how often I'm going to be using it to combo off in my Yidris Wheels deck, as there isn't really a good, there's not really an infinite combo in that deck other than just sit there and like take or draw so many cards and get so much gas that I can just keep going on my turn until hopefully I have one of my enablers that, like, every time someone discards a card they lose 2 life, and I can just do it enough times. That's the goal. I feel like Underworld Breach might is just like either gonna be played for I'm using it to combo off right now, or I'm using it as value for like the next couple turns.
Yeah, I mean, and you're definitely going to be using it late game because every single spell that you're going to cast with it, you have to exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. Which if you're trying to do 2 or 3 wheel effects, you're gonna have to have 6, 9 other cards that you're gonna be able to exile and not feel bad about getting rid of.
Exactly. And with that, I think that's enough about Underworld Breach. We can move on to probably my favorite god of Theros, Perforos, Bronze Blooded. 4 and a red for a 7/6. Indestructible legendary enchantment creature god. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, he's not a creature. Other creatures you control have haste, and 2 and a red, you may put a red creature card or an artifact creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So it's basically sneak attack.
I really like him as well. I mean, he is the the fattest command or not commander, but god that we got from the set being a 7/6. Um, Other creatures you control having haste is always good, especially you're playing aggro, things like that. Or even if you're playing, sacrifice stuff where you gotta tap and sacrifice stuff, which I don't know that you'd be doing in red, but just an example. Uh, you'll be able to drop those things and tap them as soon as you play them. And, haste is always just good, and it being indestructible, obviously, as all the gods are, is always very nice. And my favorite, sneak attack. I love sneak attack things.
Wait, well, hold on. Let me ask you the question that I know you're probably about to answer. Does this get into Kalia?
So I was thinking about that, and I'm not sure obviously I can't sneak attack him with Kalia, and the one problem that I kind of have with him is the fact that you're obviously he's not going to be a creature unless your devotion is a 5 or greater. So it's one of those things where like I think he's good as an enchantment because he's gonna let me sneak attack other things, but I feel like the slots in that deck are really hard. I definitely want to try him. I guess I'll kind of wrap up with saying that I'm being kind of long winded here. I want to get him. I want to try it and see how I feel. I think because I have Ilharg in there right now. There's
That was my
another.
next question was, do you think, because I know you run Ilharg in there, do you think that Perforos Bronze Blooded comes out just for testing? Do you think that's where you make the switch? Because if
Yeah.
it were me, that's where I would test it and make the switch there.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, the reason for that switch is a both of them can't be sent in with Kalia, and I think his sneak attack is better. I mean, yes, you have to pay mana for it, but I also don't have to put him in danger via attacking or things like that to send out a creature. And if I have, if it's late game and I have a lot of open mana, which generally in Kalia my mana's open because I don't have to cast creatures, I can pay, 6, 9 mana and drop three creatures and swing for lethal.
How many red creatures are in Kalia? Just to wrap this up.
Honestly, I'm not sure off the top of my head. Probably like 10. Red's probably the lowest color, I think, out of my deck. There's a lot of pretty decent dragons though, and a lot of them do have 2 or 3 pips, like red mana pips. So I think that he will definitely get activated at some point.
I'm scared to have Aurelia the War Leader dropped on me out of nowhere by this guy. That's what I'm
That
scared of.
that's fair,
And
cause there's a I'll probably have Kalia out as well, and then he'll be out. So that's 4. So if I have one other red creature, he's gonna get turned on, and he'll be swinging for double damage. Everyone's gonna be swinging for double damage. It's just gonna hurt.
yeah, and with that, I think we can move on to Perforos's intervention. Actually, X and a red for a sorcery. Choose one. You create an X1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next sign step. Perforos's intervention deals twice X damage to target creature or planeswalker. Definitely the worst one of the 5.
Absolutely, that was the first thing I was thinking. It's definitely the worst one. Like that first ability, an X1 red elemental with trample and haste. Okay, someone has shock and it's dead, and so you've wasted however much mana to that you sink into this. Um,
I think the only
and
saving grace is that it's like a glorified burn spell that like I guess if you're the kind of deck that wants to run Lightning Bolt, then I guess maybe you're willing to give up the instant speed, 1 mana, deal 3 damage for a sorcery speed, X in a red, deal twice X damage, but you can't go to the face with it. You can only hit a creature or planeswalker.
see, I honestly don't see this swapping out for lightning bolt or anything like that. And because yeah, twice X is nice, but even if I pay, I'm gonna have to pay 3 mana to get more value than lightning bolt, and well, I'm sorry, 2 mana to get more value than lightning bolt.
Well, Lightning
To
Bolt doesn't see play in Commander anyway, so it was probably a bad
well,
example.
true, but but it also only hits creatures or planeswalkers. I do like the planeswalker bit there because there isn't that much good planeswalker removal out there. So, if someone's used a minus ability on their planeswalker, so it's already at like 3 or 4, and you only pay a couple mana into it, you can trunk down their planeswalker and kill them. But there's better removal out there, honestly. Maybe like or for creatures anyway, maybe not necessarily for planeswalkers. That's the only saving grace I see for this card.
Yeah, and it's just not good. And with that, we can move on to the next card. Aaron, I'll let you read Storm Herald because you were the one who put it on this list.
Oh, all right. So, Storm Herald is 2 and a red. He's a human shaman with haste. When Storm Herald enters the battlefield, return any number of aura cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to creatures you control. Exile those auras at the beginning of your next end step. If those auras would leave the battlefield, exile them instead of putting them anywhere else. I think this card's really cool for mostly for Voltron because the one thing that Voltron kind of has a hard time with is if once their whatever their Voltron commander is, once it gets removed, all their enchantments go away, and they stack 3, 4, 5 enchantments on it. It's gonna be hard to get all of those back efficiently and in a quick enough time to where you can swing in for lethal. So with Storm Herald, you pay 3 and you get every single one of them back, and not just to your hand, but to the battlefield. You can attach them on any of your creatures. So stack them up on your Voltron commander, turn it sideways, and hopefully kill your opponents or do whatever it is your deck's wanting to do.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of experience with auras or like really enchantment based decks, but I do know that not a lot of them are like focused in red. So I feel like that's probably a big thing against this card. But other than that, like it seems okay. I think it kind of shores up the problem of well, if I destroy the creature that has all the auras on it, say like I stack 3 auras on a single creature, well then I can play Storm Herald and get them back. I feel like it kind of like shores up that issue slightly.
A lot of times it seems more like red's kind of a color that is splashed for in different aura decks. A lot of times it's like green, white, and red, or things like that, or just Boros even, so just the white red. Um, and I think that Storm Herald is one of those cards that, you know, for the handful of red slots that you have, this is definitely a card that's going to go in there.
I also feel like this is kind of like the last hurrah card because if those auras would leave the battlefield again, you have to exile them. So then there's really no way of getting them back. So I feel like Storm Herald is probably one of those cards that you hold in your hand until like the very end after you've like maybe rebuilt after a board wipe, and then you can drop it and then take someone out of the game.
Yeah, it's definitely a take someone out of the game type card, and hopefully it's the last person or the second to last person standing, I guess I should say. Um, but I think that it's definitely going to find a couple of slots in Voltron. We'll kind of see. Um, but I think with that we can move on to Dryad of uh,
Elysian Grove. I'm
uh,
not really. It's a
yeah.
city or something in Theros. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, Cameron, you put this one on there, so why don't you go ahead and read it for us?
So Dryad of Elysian Grove, 2 and a green for a 2/4 enchantment creature nymph. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. I feel like this card is really good in like number one lands based decks because the lands based decks always want to be able to play an additional land on each of their turns. This is good in like 5 color decks because all lands you control, not just basic lands. I feel like that's a notable portion of this card. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So now my basic planes can tap for all 5 colors of mana. I feel like that's very notable. This gets around Blood Moon, because lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So that means if someone has Blood Moon on the battlefield, well, it doesn't really affect my lands because they're already mountains anyway. It's a good card. I feel like it goes in the more color intensive 3 to 4 color green based, or not green based decks, but 3 to 4 color decks that have green in it, maybe primarily as just a mana fixer, because it's almost kind of like Chromatic Lantern in a way, except it's a creature. It's just good.
Yeah,
I don't have anything else to say about it other than it's good.
yeah,
It's playable.
good mana fixing, and for if you're playing an enchantment deck, maybe get some constellation triggers off of it. It's the only other notable thing about it. I think with that we can just move on to Nylea Keen-Eyed. Nylea Keen-Eyed, 3 and a green, indestructible. As long as your devotion to green is less than 5, Nylea isn't a creature. Creature spells cost 1 less to cast, and then for 2 and a green, reveal the top card of your library. It's a creature card. Put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. It's a 5. She's a 5/6. She's
This
good value.
I feel like that's basically all she is just good value. You have to be in a creature based deck, and then I feel like you also have to have a way to maybe sneak attack out your creatures because Nylea can get them into your hand. So maybe if you're in a red green deck and you play Nylea and Perforos, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature, say it's a red creature, I can put it in my hand and then I can activate Perforos and sneak attack them onto the battlefield. So I feel like she's just kind of like a medium okay. You'd probably want to play her in a creature based deck. I mean, she is a 5/6 indestructible. She does discount your creatures by 1, and then she can help you like say you are in a red green deck. Red green's got a lot of card draw, and then red has a decent amount, but the amount of card draw that's in red, you're not really going to be playing in like a red green creature based deck. So I feel like the 3 mana ability to look at the top card of your library if it's a creature, it's basically card drawing. So I basically pay 3 mana to draw a card, but if it's not a creature, I can put it into my graveyard. So it's like pseudo card draw. She's just kind of okay.
Yeah, I think she's good value for your creature-based decks, and that's really all I have to say on her.
Yeah. The next card on our list, though, I feel like is definitely one of those cards that has more of a home in Commander because there's actually a card very similar to this one, and it was printed in Commander 2015, and the name of which escapes me. But the name of the creature that we're talking about is Arasta. Arista of the Endless Web. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. 2 green green for a 3/5 legendary enchantment creature Spider. Whenever an opponent casts an instant sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green Spider creature token with Reach. Now, the card that was printed in Commander 2015 isn't it's an instant, and it's whenever it's basically kind of like a fog type thing where say somebody attacks me with 15 1/1s, well then I cast it's Arachnogenesis. I cast Arachnogenesis, and I make 15 1/2 spiders with Reach. It's kind of the same thing. I feel like
I totally thought you were talking about the legendary spider creature. She's the Gruul that whenever I think it's whenever a opponent casts any spell. I'm pretty sure you create like a 1/1 spider or something like that.
it's
I
kind of
totally
similar. It's similar to
thought
that too.
that. Yeah, I think it's closer to that than Arachnogenesis, but she Arasta is mono green as this other card whose name is also escaping me, but that one's in Gruul, so you can put her in more homes than than the other card, and the spiders are a little bit better, but I will double check this. But I believe that the other spider that I'm thinking of has whenever any opponent casts a spell, you make a 1/1.
I think it's Dragon Lair Spider you're thinking of. Yeah, Dragon Lair Spider for 2 red red green green. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, it's a 1/1 green insect creature token.
Okay.
Um, I I'm really I'm struggling to pronounce this name. Arasta of the Endless Web. I really like this card, and I think it's gonna find a home in maybe a couple of my green base stacks. I'm not entirely sure which ones yet. Well, one of them I know for sure, but I'm not really sure on the others. I'm gonna kind of play around with it, but I really like this design. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I definitely I really like this. I really like Aracida, and I think she's gonna be fun to play around with. Um, but I don't know. I don't have a lot to say on her. I haven't thought about using her that much. So Cameron, if you want to talk about her before we move on at all.
I don't really have anything else to say other than like she's. I mean, like if you're gonna, she fits into a green based token deck, pretty well, and also a green based creature deck pretty well because, again, you're going to be playing with 3 other people, so you're probably going to get a decent amount of triggers before they eventually get rid of her, and then even then you're going to be left with a bunch of 1/2 spiders with reach, so they're able to block flyers, and that's pretty good. Um, she's just pretty good. I feel like she's going to find some homes in a lot of commander decks.
I'm so excited about this next card.
This I don't think this card is as good as everybody thinks it is, but I
I
do
mean,
like it. It's
it's
very
not,
cool. It's very
but
cool
yeah, it's
though.
very cool. We got Nyx Bloom Ancient for 4 green, green, green. Trample. He's a 5/5 elemental enchantment creature. And if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead.
So it's a mana tripler.
I think he's so cool. And, like, think about Soul Ring for just a second. Tapping you for 6 mana.
It does sound nuts.
That sounds so good.
I think this card is gonna be good, especially if you can protect. Like, if you manage to like get this out while everybody's shields are down, you should be. I want to say you should be winning the game, but I'm not entirely sure.
It just depends on what you use the mana for, I guess.
I think this card goes really well with like sneak attack cards because so you're like, let's say you're doing this with Perforos, so I play Perforos and then I sneak attack out this Nyx Bloom Agent. Well, then I have a little bit of time to have triple mana, and also if they don't remove it while it's on the battlefield, it's gonna go back to my hand, so it's kind of like protected. I like that interaction. I think that's pretty neat.
Well, with Perforos, you'll have to sacrifice it, but
Oh
there,
well,
you
no, we
know,
can't do that with Perforos. Perforos has to be a red creature. Oh
no,
no.
that
Well, you
too.
can do it with a regular sneak attack.
Yeah,
I
true.
think. I think regular sneak attack you don't have to. Um, I don't think it's just red creatures.
But yeah, but this card, like, I remember when I saw the spoilers for this card, and obviously, the initial excitement made me not think about any downside, like the fact that it's 7 mana. But like, I just think it's really cool. Um, just being able to, like, there's been a good amount of mana doublers. You got Vorinclex and things like that. But Nyx Bloom Ancient just took that to another level and said, "I see your double mana. I'm a triplet," and he's just gonna be really fun to play with and see what kind of shenanigans you can do with the triple mana.
This card belongs in a deck that's going to be able to abuse it. And I think that's the biggest catch for this card is that it's 7 mana, 3 green pips. So like if you're in a 3 color deck that's not primary in green, like it doesn't go in every green deck. I think it really only goes in the green decks that can take advantage of the triple mana. So like your big mana decks where you have like a lot of X spells. Maybe I fireball somebody for 20 by only tapping like what I don't know, like 5 or 6 lands. I'm not sure. Um or well, if it taps for triple, if I tap 5 lands, it's 15 damage. So maybe I fireball somebody for 15. That's where this card's really gonna shine. Is that in those big mana decks where this thing hits the battlefield and then I start, like lobbing X spells this and that way, or I play some big permanent of some kind. And I think that's where this card's really going to shine. I don't think it's necessarily going to be as good in every other green deck that it could be put in.
So I've got a question for you. What do you think is a bigger target, Nyx Bloom Agent or Vorinclex? And I understand he nets you more mana.
Oh man.
However, Vorinclex, makes it so people's lands stay tapped for a turn.
Do you
So
mean like, am I playing them in the same deck?
well, let's just say, like, let's say you're playing against both of them. Let's say,
Oh
I
man.
drop a Vorinclex and someone else at the table drops Nyx Bloom Ancient, but you only have one removal spell in your hand. Which one are you going after first?
I try to make the deal with the Nyx Bloom player to use his triple mana to get rid of the Vorinclex. That's what I
I think
try to do. And
I
if
think
that
that's fair.
and then if that fails, I go after the Vorinclex player because I don't like Vorinclex. I don't like not being able to untap my lands.
Yeah, I think that, and I think the Nyx Bloom Ancient player is gonna see the Vorinclex and be like, I have to handle that because yes, I'll be able to get triple mana, but I'm only gonna be able to do it once, and by the time his lands on tap, Nyx Bloom Ancient's probably gonna be dead.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely go after the Vorinclex just because it's a lot harsher and it's a lot. I'm gonna get punished a lot harder. Whereas I feel like the Nyx Bloom Ancient player is also under the same gun, the same Vorinclex gun, where they can't tap their permanents, otherwise they'll stay tapped.
Now, so that's the one thing that I was thinking about. It says permanence as Nyx Bloom Ancient says permanence. Vorinclex is strictly to lands.
Well, I mean, like it depends on what kind of like mana rocks they have. Like if they have chromatic lanterns and those are gonna untap every turn, I feel like the Nyx Bloom Ancient player is just kind of laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah,
But I also feel like they're under the same Vorinclex gun, and not just because their lands won't untap, but because the Vorinclex player is locking everybody else down at the table and getting double mana, and then restricting the Nyx Bloom players to just their mana rocks. So they've
yeah,
already kind of got them where they want them. So what they could do is with their double mana, they could just use a removal spell on Nyx Bloom to keep that player. Well, now that the Nyx Bloom player is screwed.
yeah. I think with that hypothetical, we can move on to Nylea's intervention. For X, a green and a green, choose one, search your library for up to X land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Or Nylea's intervention deals twice X damage to each creature with flying.
I put this one on the list because this finds Dark Depths Thespian Stage. And I know that's like a combo for like modern or not modern, but like legacy. Actually, I don't know if Dark Depths combo is actually in modern or not. It's for like 60 card formats basically, but it's also not nothing in Commander to just pay 4 mana to go find Thespian Stage Dark Depths and then hopefully maybe you have a mana rock to activate the Thespian Stage. Or like you probably put this in the same deck that the Dryad Elysian Groves goes in because then I can play one of those lands. Like this card's basically going to go into a lands based deck where they can fetch out the Dark Depths Thespian Stage combo or whatever. Just go find an insane amount of lands and then put them all onto the battlefield like in the Azusa deck where they can just use all that mana to like cast big stuff and keep the engine going. And then, the deals X damage to each creature with flying is kind of it's just kind of eh. I think you're playing this for the ability to find any land. It's not just a basic land.
Yeah, I really like the fact that it's not just basics, and I think that's what kind of puts this above some other like um ramp spells. I think that I would actually probably play this before. I don't want to say cultivate.
No, I don't think you ever played this before
Yeah, I don't
Cultivate
think you ever played this before cultivate, but like
because
I think
Cultivate puts one on the battlefield, one in your hand. This one
true.
puts both of them in your hand.
I I don't know. I almost I don't know that it. I'm trying to think about.
I would play this over Explosive Vegetation.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'd rather
That
play this over Explosive Vegetation.
yeah. Cause
Pay 2 green green, go find 2 lands, and I think Explosive Vegetation lets you go find 2 lands too.
yeah, and I think that in that regard, it's because is explosive vegetation's basic, is it not?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think this is gonna be one of those things where you you just find one of your ramp spells that says basic on it, just that just looks for basics, and then not the ones that put it on the battlefield per se, but the ones that put it in your hand, but they only let you search for basics, and then you play Nylea's intervention over that because you can search for your shocks or anything like that.
Well, that's the reason I say I played over explosive vegetation, because explosive vegetation still gets them onto the battlefield. But if I'm really hurt for, like, say I'm playing this in a 3-color deck, and man, I need that second or third blue and or black pip, then I'm more than likely gonna either, well, number one, fix my mana base, but number two, Nylea's intervention, because then I can go find any two lands, and I'm probably gonna find shocks or dual lands or something like that.
Yeah, and then the last ability here deals twice X damage to each creature with flying. It's pretty good if you have trouble with flyers, I guess. But it's just like Perforos intervention where you're just like, it's there. But I think that top ability is definitely what you're going to be using Nylea's intervention for anyway.
And with that, I think we could move on to Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. So for 1 green blue, you get a 6/6 legendary creature, Elder Giant. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. Whenever Uro enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life, draw a card, and then you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield, and it escapes for green, green, blue, blue, and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. I think this card's kind of nuts.
I like this card a lot, and there's one thing that I wanted to talk about of a card that was printed during last set, Hushbringer. Um, and it has the same text as Torpor Orb saying, creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Um, Now I know that that's gonna negate his first ETB of gaining 3 life and drawing a card, but you're not gonna have to sacrifice it once it enters, and then you're gonna get to start attacking with this 6/6 on turn 3. You know, because you can maybe Hushbringer or Torp Orb turn 2, and then I think Torp Orb's the more likely of the two because
Goes in more decks.
Hushbringer's yeah, and Hushbringer's in white. But so Torpor turn 2, turn 3, Uro, and then just start turning sideways with a 6/6 and doing all this good stuff on turn 4. Like that's really nuts. And I
It's really good, but you also got to think about it at the same time. Assuming that I get, like Torpor with my opening hand, or I have a way to tutor for it or whatever, and I can get Uro down on turn 3, it's just a vanilla 6/6 at that point.
well for one turn, sure, but people aren't gonna have that much removal or anything like that during that early in the game,
Well, I'm not
and so
saying that you can't cause some serious havoc during, like, you might be able to get maybe
well because it's
18 damage dealt in total before someone deals with this.
yeah, so 18 damage, which is gonna draw you. So that you're gonna draw 3 cards, gain 9 life, and hopefully put 3 lands onto the battlefield because it's
Oh, it does
whenever.
say whenever he attacks. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, that is why that's gonna be the big thing here is you just want to start getting those attack triggers, and you know there's a lot of ways to get to
Yeah,
do that.
I
So,
guess I was thinking, I'm like, that's not great, but I forgot that it's his attacks. Reading the card explains the card. I'm
but
I'm kind
he's
of
just
like
yeah.
butthurt that I can't put this in my blink deck, and I can't just sit here and gain 3 life, draw a card. I can't just like have Chulane for 3 mana because
I'm glad you can't do that.
this card would be busted.
I mean,
This card would like shatter Modern if it didn't say sacrifice it unless it escaped, because then, I mean, Ephemerate's already pretty good, but imagine if I could Ephemerate this thing. It'd be
oh
really
no.
good.
Yeah. I mean, he's just really good value. He's a really good card. Maybe I want to know what you guys do with this card. If you play him with Torpor or Hushbringer or whatever, if you make him your commander. So let us know down in the comments below what you do with Uro. And with that, we'll go to our next card here, being the next Titan, um, Crap,
I think it's
Crow,
pronounced Croxa.
yeah, Croxa. Titan of Hunger's Death for a black and a red. When he enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. So, and then whenever Kroxa enters the battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card, and then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. He's nowhere near as good as Uro.
Ah, I think you can escape from the command zone though. I'm pretty sure you can.
Wait, can you really?
I think you can. I'm not sure. I thought I heard. I thought maybe it was Jimmy and Josh over on the Command Zone podcast talking about how you pay black, black, red, red, and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. Oh, maybe not. You cast this card from your graveyard for escape cost. Maybe you can't escape from the Command Zone.
I didn't think so.
I'm not sure.
But
Huh,
I mean,
that's weird.
he's still a good card. I mean, having people discard, and if you didn't discard a non-land, lose 3 life. That's nothing to laugh at or anything. He's definitely gonna bring some pain. He's a 6/6 as well. So
I don't think it's as good as Uro either.
yeah.
Um, and with that, we can move on to the next card on our list, which is okay. You got to pronounce this because I will absolutely just butcher it. I cannot pronounce the name of this card.
All right. So it's enigmatic incarnation is a little bit of a mouthful. For 2, a green and a blue. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another enchantment. If you do, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed enchantment's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it's a birthing pod for enchantments. I think it's pretty cool,
It's
honestly.
Enchantment Pod.
I really like it. I think that it will find a home. It might take a little bit to find its home because there aren't that many just enchantment based decks out there. But or not that I know of anyway. I don't know anyone who plays enchantment based decks. But I think this is going to be a card that's going to be a lot of fun that is definitely going to see some play because who doesn't like birthing pod? And this is just another birthing pod.
I feel like it probably finds a home in an Enchantress based deck, although I don't know of any like Bant in like Enchantress lists other than like maybe Tuvasa the Sunlit. Like I haven't seen any lists or I haven't like perused any lists or seen anything. I yeah, I mean like it's just kind of good. Like you kind of have to have a target in mind though. It's because it is a May, so like I can play this on turn 4 and that or maybe earlier and go up the scale, but I feel like whereas with Birthing Pod with creatures, moving up the scale is a lot easier. I'm just not really like an enchantment expert, so I really don't know moving up the chain of enchantments, like what your next target is, or why you would really need to like
Well,
continue moving upwards, like up the chain.
the one thing for this is it you sack enchantments to go get creatures. So if you play, a couple of early enchantments,
Oh, I
I
misread
don't
that.
know,
I thought that said
maybe
enchantment.
you're going after maybe you play like I don't know, one of the new cards like Omen of the Hunt is a pretty decent card. So and which is a 3 drop, so it's 2 and a green. So, maybe you play your Omen of the Hunt, get your land, and then at your end step, sacrifice it and go get yourself a 4 drop creature. Like that's pretty good. And it makes it a little bit difficult because an enchantment doesn't replace an enchantment. So you might lose, your targets for your next turn unless you've got, a handful of enchantments. So it's not like Pod in the sense where you can just keep moving up the chain unless you're playing an enchantment creature deck, I guess. Which I don't know of anyone who does. If you guys do, let me know. Send us the deck lists. Love to see it. Love seeing new stuff. But I still think it's a really cool card though.
I think it's pretty cool. Um, yeah, I feel like the biggest hurdle, like, yeah, because you're trading an enchantment for a creature, but I don't know how deep the well on that one goes. How many like enchantments I have to include in my deck in order to be able to take advantage of this, or like how many enchantment creatures I might need to consider looking at to take advantage of this. And even then, I'm really not sure what the payoff is. But other than that, I mean, I think it's kind of cool. I feel like we've gotten birthing pod on an artifact, on a creature, and now an enchantment. So I think it's just kind of cool to see.
So can we get a birthing pod land next?
That
That's
one that
that's
one sounds a
that's
little bit
really
more
busted.
busted.
That sounds pretty busted.
That one sounds problematic. I don't know about that one.
You gotta bounce 2 lands back into your hand, and you get to play it. I don't know, but
Oh,
with
here.
that,
I know a way to make it balanced. All right, you ready for this one? All right, here's what we do. You lose 20 life, and it enters untapped. It's a
all right,
massive shock land.
sounds good. Wizards make it happen. But with that, we'll move on to Nyx Lotus. Um, Nyx Lotus, I really like this card. It is a 4-drop legendary artifact. Enters the battlefield tapped. Choose a color. Add an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. So devotion, as we talked about through these gods, and we didn't explain it. So for those of you who may or may not know, your devotion to a color is equal to the number of mana symbols of that color in the mana costs of permanents you control. So basically those pips. So you got your, if you've got a permanent that's 2 in a red, it's your devotion to red would be 1 at that point. But so Nyx Lotus taps, you choose a color, and your devotion to that color, you're gonna get that much mana. I think this is a really cool card. It finds its home mostly in mono color, but if you have it 2 color, maybe 3 color if it's really just really heavy
I
in
don't
one
think I
color.
I don't even think this gets into a three-color deck. I think it's just
Yeah,
two.
I don't. It's definitely if you're anything above 2 color, it's gonna be super situational. If maybe you're running like green and you just wanted to play like a couple, if it's really slight splashing, but for the most part, you're just gonna run it in your 1-2 color decks.
I'm gonna try it in my artifact deck. It's a red-blue Joyra Weatherlight Captain artifact deck. I'm gonna try it. I'm not really sure how it's gonna work out because it is 4 mana and it enters the battlefield tapped. And like, yeah, it can add a ton of mana, but say by turn 4, I don't know how much this is adding, and I don't know at that point if I'd rather just take the turn off and play something smaller, or if I would just rather cast Gilded Lotus, like a turn early or something. I'm not entirely sure where I fall on this yet. I feel like I agree with what you said though. It does belong in monocolor. I mean that's where you're going to be able to take the most advantage of it because obviously you're going to have more devotion amongst one color than you will two or three. And I always like to see wizards kind of like mess around with this design where they take old cards like Black Lotus or something like that and remake it. They do it every so often with the Moxes.
I kind of want to try this in my mono red goblins deck. I want to see how many goblins I can drop with one use of Nyx Lotus.
Yeah, I mean, like, if it's gonna work anywhere, it's gonna work in a monocolor deck. How well it'll work in, say, your mono red goblins deck is not something that I can say unless I play against it and I see how much it does.
But yeah, I think if if you're running a 1 or 2 color deck, try out this card. I think it's definitely going to be one of those things where you're just gonna have to play around with it, and see if it's really getting you the value that you want it to. Um, and then that'll take us to our last card here, um, Shadow Spear. Cameron, if you want to read that for us.
Yeah, the Shadow Spear is a 1 mana legendary artifact equipment. Equipment. I'm sorry, equipment. Equipped creature you control has +1/+1, and gets trample and lifelink. One colorless mana, permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. Equip 2.
I really like this card. As we talked about earlier, um, i- indestructible is something that is ever so often pretty difficult to get around. So to have,
Well, and
you know,
hexproof too. I mean, like
yeah, and
hexproof. Holy
hexproof,
crap!
to have something that you can pay 1 mana and every single permanent my opponents and in commander that's gonna be 3 people. 1 mana, all those creatures are losing hexproof and indestructible, and I'm gonna be able to kind of have a field day with my instants and sorceries. You're not wasting that much mana to do this. Like, you're literally only doing one colorless. That's really good.
Well, I think the way that you can almost interpret this is that, like, say you have a lot of like problematic creatures, like you might have a Narset player in your meta, who obviously Narset Enlightened Master has hexproof, um, and then you might have some people who cheat out or ramp into the original or the new Eldrazi Titans, whichever ones have indestructible, um, or the obviously the gods from this Theros or the other Theros block. Basically, the way that this reads is pay 1 extra mana on my removal spell, and I get to kill that indestructible hexproof creature, whatever it may be. And I think that's the way that you almost interpret this.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it doesn't even need to be attached to any creature to use this ability.
No, it doesn't, and that's kind of the cool part is that it doesn't say you can't do this unless it's equipped. It just does it.
Yeah, it's not like one of those things where it says, like, pay 1, tap equipped creature, and then do the thing. It's just one, and then it gets to do it. So even if you know, you're about to play a removal spell and you pay 2 mana to drop the Shadow Spear and then use the ability, like, it's 2 extra mana to be able to kill a hexproof and or indestructible creature. I'm here for that, honestly.
I think you almost just play this card just because of that. Like not to
I
get as
no,
an
I agree.
equipment. Like it gets in the like any equipment deck you're going to be playing, you really want to be playing this. But at the same time, like I think this also can get in over certain other things that you might be using to get rid of said creatures.
Yeah, I like it's a really cool, just thing, and I'm really glad that we have it in a set. Obviously I don't play standard, so I'm not gonna have to deal with the gods maybe as much as other people will, but just to have something that I know can reliably get rid of indestructible and hexproof stuff is really nice.
Yeah. And with that, I mean, I think that's our top 25 cards from Theros Beyond Death. Let us know if you think we missed anything, if you think something should have been more important than it was. Uh, and with that, I guess we will see you guys next time. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.